Hello there and welcome. Better Business Bureau serving Central Oklahoma welcomes you to our virtual 2020 Trust Talks learning series. I am Casey Hunter. I'm the Communications Coordinator for Better Business Bureau serving Central Oklahoma, and I'm today's moderator for this panel. We are so excited to partner with our varying business owners and leaders and invite you to this Weathering the Storms panel webinar. This panel was truly designed to kind of take a deeper dive into preparedness and disaster planning. So we've teamed up with varying panelists who have a robust experience in different industries, who can all kind of speak to how their businesses have approached disaster planning and kind of pivoted when disruptions in the marketplace happened. So I am thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce today's panelists. So welcome, Tammy Stokes. She is the co-owner with her husband, Oklahoma Disaster Restoration, and the general manager, and she is celebrating 25 years with her company this summer. Oklahoma Disaster Restoration started off as a mom and pop operation, but has grown to a prominent business with 25 employees. On a more personal level, her company has experience with Mother Nature's power as they were struck by severe straight-line winds in 2013 that ended in a $300,000 insurance loss. She also experienced in August of 2017 another storm, an F2 tornado that pillowed through Midtown. So they were really at the heart of a lot of destruction, and they know firsthand how to navigate through that devastating loss. Tammy is also a board member with the Disaster Resilience Network and Disaster Resilience Network Business Council. So Tammy, welcome. We are so excited. And if you will wave to everybody so they can see who you are. Great. So next on the panel, we have Dan Schwartz of Global Stratacom Incorporated, a technology consulting company that specializes in digital transformation and analytics for marketing, sales, and customer engagement. He has 35 years of proven experience in technology innovation. Dan will touch on critical location notification. That took me so many times to say. It's a free app in the Apple Store and Google Play. The app allows you to check into your shelter-in-place location, and then a notification is sent to first responders so they can find you. Dan also has a FEMA National Incident Management and Incident Command certification. Dan in here with those long descriptions. So Dan, welcome to the panel. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brandon Payne, licensed agent with Brad Willis Insurance Agency. He has over 10 years of insurance experience working with clients. Brandon will share his knowledge of how to work with your trusted insurance advisor and develop a plan to conduct your business in times of storms and how to move forward after those storms hit. So Brandon, welcome to the panel. Next, we have Ryan Tisserand with Standards IT. Ryan has 15 years of experience in the information technology industry, and today Ryan will be sharing his knowledge of business continuity, disaster recovery, and how to build and implement a successful incident response plan. Ryan, welcome to the panel. Last but certainly not least, Better Business Bureau serving Central Oklahoma's VP of Communication, Allison Abbott. She has over 13 years of experience in varying roles in marketing and agency settings. Today, Allison will be sharing her knowledge about pivoting a marketing plan and repositioning your business during an evolving landscape. Allison, welcome to the panel. So now that we've had the chance to briefly meet our panelists, we are just about ready to dive into the panel, but I just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items before we begin. All guests will be muted during the panel, and please, we ask if you'll just turn off your video so we can focus on the panelists today. And if you have any follow-up questions, we encourage you to use the chat feature. Our team will be monitoring that, and we will pull those together for a Q&A at the end. All right, so if everybody is ready, I think we are ready to kick off. All right, so first question. Where should a business owner start researching or examining when preparing to plan for storms? Tammy, if you will kick us off with that question.
Thanks. With the Disaster Resilience Network, one of the apps that we use that is free is called Open for Business. It's a really great place to start. I've actually dived into it, and if I had done that before, I certainly would have been a lot more prepared for our tornadoes that hit us, but I wasn't. But I've seen several apps out there. There's Open for Business, and that was also translated into Spanish with the Disaster Resilience Network's cultural council. So that is available Spanish and English. And then there's one called ready.gov, and that's on the web. It's by the government. And then you've got preparemybusiness.org and Red Cross Ready. Each of those have some different apps that are there that kind of guide you through the questions that you need to be asked. But if you can't spend that time doing it yourself, there are many restoration companies that also do emergency plans with you, and they have apps that they go through and I actually ask you those questions, record that information, so you can have that all in one nice little put together spot. The most important thing is after you put it all together, you have to test it. You have to be able to try that plan.
Great, thank you, Tammy. And on that note, those resources that you mentioned, we'll also follow up with an email after today's panel, and we can include links to those as well. So thank you, Tammy.
Yeah.
All right, same question. I want to go ahead and ask Brandon. So where should a business owner start researching and examining when preparing to plan for storms? I want to hear your take with the insurance side of things.
So I will echo a lot of what Tammy mentioned about where to start. Red Cross, ready.gov, FEMA is another resource that I would maybe check out their website on. We have some information too that I think Casey's going to share that kind of talks about some of what disaster preparedness and a checklist to go through. And I would start, we're talking about business, but I would start with family first as a business owner. If something happens to your family, your business becomes, the second thought. So making sure that the plan is in place at home, and then you can kind of extrapolate and pivot that into making sure that you've got a plan for the business. I would certainly involve your insurance agent in that plan, as that is a vital component of making sure that your business is taken care of, is making sure you've got the right protection when a loss happens.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. So down that same trail, we have kind of a follow-up question. So in these beginning stages, what processes or software might be most helpful to a business owner? And Dan, technology is your arena, so we want to hear from you. What kind of tech, what kind of software should we be looking at?
Yeah, and I think Ryan will probably touch on this too as well. It's a good question. That I think the core thing to look at is for your business, right? So what are the key processes that you need to keep your business operational? So billing, if you want to collect revenue. So it's your billing software, right? And then if your billing software is on a computer in your office, you might look at moving that outside to the cloud. So you need to start with what are the core things you need to run to keep your business alive during the disaster, right? And from that, what software tools are associated with those processes? And then can you move those out to people, we're dealing with that now, working from home. Can you move those processes outside of your physical location? So that's where I would start, just looking at my business and the core pieces to it. And then I can get into critical location notification later, but that is obviously a tool that can use to identify where your workforce is during a disaster and where they're sheltering.
Great, thank you, Dan. So Ryan, do you have anything to add to those softwares or processes?
Yeah, I think I'll just follow on what Daniel said about documenting your environment. We recommend researching the equipment and the systems that are in place in your business. And then after you do that, if you do subjective interviews of your staff members, it'll also help maybe show some business needs that might otherwise be overlooked or unknown. Once you have that, you can develop a current state of your environment, and you can determine whether or not that can be moved outside of the building. So so that you can keep track of the environment, even if the environment is not operational. But the key components of putting together a current state take an objective and a subjective view of all your staff and your systems and your tools.
Great. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
If I could just, Ryan made a really good point there, and that was, your business continuity, keeping your business running versus disaster recovery, which is the physicality of your people and your location, right? So keep the business running, and then physically, what are you going to do, right, with your people and your location?
Great. Also, to that same question, Allison, we'd like to hear from you. What processes, specifically marketing processes, should be examined in these beginning stages?
Thanks, Casey. You bet. What I have seen over the course of my career, previous to my experience at BBB in, for example, advertising agency settings, is a lot of folks really forget the marketing piece of it. Right now, especially in our current landscape, and as Oklahomans, of course, we're also dealing with physical storms, right? So all the storms, hence weathering the storms panel here today. I see a lot of folks really forget to have a plan for that and tools in place for that. So for example, if you pre-write a lot of your social content, are you scheduling that out a little bit further? And/or are you examining it to make sure that it makes sense, that it's sort of appropriate in real time? So some different processes like that, looking at what content you've already built out, maybe pulling it out a little bit, but making, again, certain that you are examining it before it goes out and is relevant to that time frame. So that might be one thing to consider there, and we'll talk about more tools marketing wise as we get to things a little bit further today.
Great tip. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to question 2. And this is something that I think we hear about often. Who should be included in this planning process? So Ryan, I think let's start with you on this question. Who would you include in your planning process?
Yeah, I would include everybody. Depending on the size of your company, it might require a departmental collection of the business needs. Those would be added to an overall company set of business needs that would be evaluated by the leadership team. But when you're trying to define the current state of your environment before a disaster, if you're able to do that, to help define what your end state would look like in a perfect world so that you would be prepared for something, the gap analysis requires everybody. So including everybody in that planning process will help determine all the tools that are in use in your business. Most of the time, there's some things that are going to be unknown and are pretty critical to the way the business runs. So I would include everybody.
Great, thank you. On this same question, Tammy, I'd like to hear from you. And really, after those disasters hit your business, what did that planning look like for you? Because I'm sure that kind of made you rethink your plan and kind of reevaluate. So who did you include in that process?
We didn't have a plan for us getting hit. We're the disaster recovery team. We're the ones that go out and rescue people and we help people. So we really did not anticipate that happening to us. But, in our very quickness, the most important, you need to have your key players of your company and their departments prepared. When disaster struck us, I called, my number one and the team of managers, and each of them contacted all the members of their team, and we got everybody into action pretty immediately because we lost everything in the offices, and then we also had our customers' contents that could potentially be affected, and so they were there trying to make sure that it's mitigated. But mainly it's making sure that you do that second call probably went to my insurance agent and got him involved. Of course, he came out. That third one was to our roofer to get something in place immediately to stop that water. So you have to take care of that mitigation. Small, medium-sized business, or you're a business owner, you need to let your family kind of know kind of things happen. Sometimes they want to reach out and help, and let them know ahead of time what their help could be for you, and to let them know, I'm going to be a little bit out of commission for a while, you know.
Great. Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that like Tammy and Ryan and Brent on the insurance side, build your vendor relationships in that direction before an event happens. So work with your vendors, and build, like Tammy's services, you may not need them now, but, make a call early, hey, what would it take? What should we do before the event happens? Vendors can be great partners through efforts like this, especially ones that are focused on these kinds of issues.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to add on to that. I have that in my notes as well, to work with those vendors. When you have some key vendors that you're working with, so that in the event, let's say that you purchase things and they're all out, and you try to establish a new relationship with a vendor, they typically won't give you priority or take care of your needs unless you're a current customer. And so it's a lot easier to establish, have a couple of vendors for each of your real major things, and then make sure that you have your lines of credits open with them. They already have your credit information. You're set up to rock and roll. And it might not be bad to go ahead and place an order so that they know that you're real.
Great. I love that advice. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next question. So once we've done our research and we've developed these processes, like if we've done research on disruption impact on our businesses, we've evaluated our financials, where do we go next? So Allison, I want to hear from you on this. What does that look like for marketing and communications?
Thanks, Casey. Well, I'll say I think it kind of depends on the situation. So I'll share some quick updates of what we at our BBB have experienced and gone through in the last roughly 8 or so weeks. So of course, we were planning this panel for today, and it was originally called Weather the Storms, but geared toward, if you will, physical storms that we experience as Oklahomans. And then, guess what? We had a pandemic globally. So like people and most businesses, we ripped up essentially our marketing plan, and we decided to keep the theme Weathering the Storms, and we added in pandemic-related messaging. So again, I think it depends on the situation. As Oklahomans, we can count on every year, roughly April through June, sometime in June. We're talking about physical storms, and that is a big part of our reality. When we layered in this, though, all things COVID, in ripping up that marketing plan, the processes simply weren't there, because as marketers, we have to be really conscious to be on brand and timely with our messaging, if you will. And so we were not creating social content weeks in advance like we might typically otherwise for events and things that we already know that we had existing on our calendars. So we were literally writing social media content daily and posting it and coming up with press releases as we were hearing about scams in the marketplace and sharing out with the media so that we could get that message out to consumers and businesses. So it was a little bit of a different way in which we typically otherwise would work, because the landscape called for that process to shift and have it be in the moment in real time, a little bit not unlike crisis PR type communication. If you've ever heard of that, experienced it, worked with a PR firm, read about it, it was very much in the moment. So the last 6 weeks at our BBB in the way of marketing and putting together various events and messaging to try and lend support to businesses of all sizes and consumers as well. It's been a top task, but it's been really fun. So again, I think it just calls for the situation and the landscape.
Thank you, Allison. to that same question, we've done our research, we've developed processes or examined processes. What do we do now? I want to hear from Dan on this question.
I think one thing you can do, after you have a plan set in place, is practice. We used to do a test that several companies that I've worked for here in Oklahoma City and other places where one test we did, and it's a pretty large corporation, that people showed up to work and no one could get in the building. So it was a test disaster and people were sent home and they had to practice their disaster recovery and business continuity plan. So I think practice is important at some scale, right? To practice a plan and processes you've put in place in case of an emergency or disaster.
I think you're absolutely on track with that. Sometimes we can't always prepare for like what we're going through now. I don't think anybody thought this would happen, but definitely I know that our BBB has practiced some different situations and talked through those processes. And I think that if some of those other things were to happen, I think it would help us be more prepared. So I totally am with you on that.
Add on to Dan in his point about practicing. I think you have to, I think it kind of goes without saying, but you almost want to say, communicate the plan to everybody so that everybody's on the same page. And that's from the top down to your employees, so they know what they're supposed to do when a disaster happens. And medium, larger size businesses where you've got managers need to know what they're supposed to do, have that delegation of responsibility so that not everyone's mass panicking of, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. Who do we call? Who do I, you want to make sure that plan is clear and concise enough and easy to be able to practice and follow up and not have, you don't want, oh, I have a plan for this and this and this and this and this, and now we've got 10 plans and now it's too complicated. Nobody will remember it all.
Right. And Brandon, to your point, and we've talked about this in our marketing department, is that's one of the bigger mistakes that companies can make, because when it comes to communication, all of our employees are communicating out to our clients, our customers, and if they don't know what's going on, that can be a big marketing fail for your business because it makes you look unprepared. And so absolutely. Great ad. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. I think you all had some great feedback on that, so thank you. What are some key disaster planning tips and preparedness tips that businesses may not be thinking of that should be included in their storm or disaster plan? So Tammy, let's start with you on this one, because I'm sure there's some things that you thought of after your business went through different things and you think, man, I wish I would have known that beforehand.
Yeah, of course. And I think that I think Dan kind of hit on some of that as well as Ryan. One of the key things that happened to us was our server was not, it wasn't initially damaged. There was all of our computers were damaged, but our server wasn't. We were able to recover it, and it just was a blessing that worked out. But we had things that we ended up doing is getting a computer company that helped us create a dual backup of our server and then an offsite backup of our server. So that was very key for us to have something that was not at our physical location, that was offsite, so that we always had that to back up to. So I think that was kind of very, very key. I also think we identify that cash is one of those things that you don't really back. We also learn credit with your bank, that you and you don't need the money. That's when you the easy to get the money. Have a backup with your bank to have a revolving line of credit in case you need some of that extra cash to help flow.
So that before planning, absolutely. Thank you, Tammy. Next, I'm going to jump to Ryan on this same question because Tammy kind of touched on it. You know, she wasn't expecting that her server was going to need any work. So what things have you seen that maybe businesses are forgetting to plan for when it comes to their infrastructure?
Yeah, so it's been touched on several times, but business continuity is it's not the same thing as disaster recovery. They're separate things. And most of the time in my industry, people will have backups, which is a struggle a lot of times just to have backups, but that's considered disaster recovery. But simply having backups, although it's imperative, it doesn't address the business continuity piece. If there's a storm like you were talking about and the hardware is destroyed, where do you restore your backups? How long does it take to get or procure new equipment that your business needs to operate? So if you take the time to define your critical systems, the maximum amount of time those systems can be down, the cost it takes to recover those systems, and then include continuity in the planning process, then you'll have less downtime. We found that there's plenty of ways to move infrastructures to the cloud, which will prevent having to have equipment in the building, at least pieces. Maybe it's just your phone system. Maybe it's your entire environment. At Standards IT, we're 100% cloud. Our phones, our infrastructure is 100% cloud. But there may be softwares that don't allow for that, and you'll need an internal system. But if you've documented how long it takes to procure equipment to restore to in the event of an outage, those are the ways to help reduce downtime.
I would like to add to that one thing that it's hard to do, and people don't usually do it, but to add to your plan a postmortem. So after the event, you know, we don't like the pain that we have to go through, but it's helpful after the event and after everything's back and you're hopefully back to normal operations that you look back and go, okay, while it's fresh in your mind, what went wrong? What do we need to include in the plan moving forward? You know, to really take a look at it afterward. Usually you just want to move on and not think about it again because it's so painful, but it's really important to put that in your plan, to take some time out to really look back and see what you could adjust and tweak for the next event.
Thank you, Dan.
I think it's also important to recognize how critical your business may be for employees. I mean, for example, Ryan's, I'm certain, is highly critical to many businesses. So if something happens to his company, being able to serve those clients to not have them also be impacted by the same situation. I mean, we have a claim team that has to be on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to be able to serve our clients. And so if our claim center in Northwest Oklahoma City gets hit by a tornado, there has to be a contingency to have them up and running, you know, right away. And so recognizing how is your business critical to other businesses, what are you serving, and if your business goes down, is how many other people is that going to affect, and being aware of that to then work backwards from, okay, here's the plan that needs to happen to be able to continue to be up and running.
Thank you. I'm gonna.
Is it okay if I tag on to that?
Yep, go ahead.
So what he was saying, Brandon, that happened to us. Ideal, because like when we were hit by the tornado, I had to think, you know, I could use my own restoration company to take and repair us. One of those, is this the best thing for us to do? But in that particular situation, I ended up calling and creating an ally with one of my competitors, because I had a lot of people who were depending on us, all of, you know, our customers that we serve, that we're taking care of broken glass and roofs that have been ripped off and things like that. And so we had to make that so our key employees were able to continue to do work. And then the main focus ended up being for us as an administrative team to have we moved in a mobile trailer into our parking lot, and that's what they ran, a cable line for the internet to that, had our phones moved to that small little trailer, and it was crazy. But our techs, they were able to still go out and service our customers. And that was really key, because we realized that we were very critical to helping other people. And so I think, Brandon, that was right on. You know, sometimes you have to have a backup for when you're the provider for that care. Who cares for you when you need that? And so for us, it was we created an ally with a competitor, and now we continue to help each other when we both get big jobs. So.
And the communication of all of that is so incredibly key, right? At the heart of the marketer, I'm listening to all of this and I'm going, yes, but we have to make sure we tell people about this, right? So, for example, with the current pandemic, something that BBB is offering its accredited businesses nationwide, if they so choose to include this, we have a little "we're working" type logo. If they reach out to us, they, the accredited businesses, and say to BBB, yes, I would like that added to my profile on bbb.org, we can put that up there, because folks are looking for communication from all of your businesses. So again, for example, with our current shelter in place going for roughly about another week here in the Oklahoma City market, people are looking to see if businesses are open, if they're in operation, and or how has their operation shifted. And so whether it's this type of storm, the pandemic, or a physical storm, you know, putting that communication there quickly too is really key. So a piece of advice I've been offering to our accredited businesses is one social platform and guide all of your clientele and your community to that one social platform and update daily on what you have going on. So a presentation Dan and I did a couple weeks back, I shared some examples of a local coffee shop. And of course, they can't serve in their dining room the way they typically would right now, receive people into their physical store. So in my opinion, they're doing a really great job daily of giving updates of, here are our hours, and hey, we're offering this special, and on Thursday we're going to be offering this type of coffee that's not typically on our menu. Some different things like that. So that's one example, but a great one of how folks are putting that information out there quickly. Similarly, you know, if you were to get hit by a storm, people are looking for that communication. An ad agency I used to work for manages a lot of casino businesses across the state. And it was interesting to me in my first tornado season with them that a lot of folks locally near to the casino think that they're a great place to shelter in place during, you know, when in fact, many of them are not equipped to do so and or can't hold that many people. And so a task that the agency teammates and I had to do was make sure that we tactfully shared information on behalf of those casinos on their social pages to say, hey, this is not a place to come, we're closing temporarily, and you know, we're going to be watching the storm, if you will, type of message. So sharing in real time and keeping people apprised of your business operation, no matter the type of storm, is really crucial.
Thank you. All right, so before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to remind everybody that if guests, if you have any follow-up questions that you want to ask during the Q&A, just please leave those in the chat section, and our team will kind of pull those together, and then we'll move on toward the end. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question. This one, I'm excited to hear everybody's answers about. So, if no pre-storms plan has been created, and we find ourselves in an uncertain market like what we're dealing with now, where should businesses look? What resources would be most helpful? And panelists, this is a great time to kind of talk about your current experiences with what's going on right now. So, who do I want? Let's start with Ryan on this one.
So yeah, if you're not prepared for a storm, the first thing I would do is just turn to my staff and my customers and my vendors. The people that are going to make your business possible are going to be interested in you succeeding. So they're going to usually be willing to offer advice and assistance during a storm or, you know, a disaster. An example of that would be the Paycheck Protection Program that was offered during the COVID-19 that we're going through right now. When I read the documentation, it was changing so often, it was confusing, it was hard to understand, it was hard for me to wrap my head around. So I reached out to one of my larger customers. I knew that they would have a team of people that were looking at it, that wasn't just someone like myself, that they would understand it. And with their help, we were able to follow their instructions and gain approval and funding from the program. So I would just recommend, depending on the people that depend on you or that you support, so that they can help you be successful, and they're probably going to be very happy to help keep you successful if they depend on you.
Thank you. Brandon, let's go to you next. So we don't have a plan. We're in a market like we are now. Where should businesses look?
So, I mean, I think if you don't have a plan, I'll echo what Ryan said about making sure that your teammates, your employees, and then your customers, starting to reach out to them to let them know that, the situation may be affecting you. But also, I would reach out to your insurance agent for information. That would be one of my first calls. I know for my clients, everybody's kind of mentioned vendors and reaching out to them. One of the reasons that I do what I do is I make connections in worlds where I know my clients may need help with things, and that can be from the situation we're in right now to a physical storm. I've got banking contacts that I know that I've been able to visit with my clients on, or even people that I know that may not be clients, and say, you go talk to the banker here, because they can be helpful. And I've already started that process, making that connection, and I want my clients to view me as a trusted advisor and somebody that if I'm going to put my name out there for somebody else, that they know they can trust that individual. And we live it every day. We plan for these things. When I was planning for and preparing for this platform, all these things came in my mind, and I kept telling myself, I can't believe all this stuff that just is out there, and people don't think of that every day. So you've got to lean on those people that you know. I also wrote down, local, state, federal government. They're going to be putting out a ton of information. Better Business Bureau has a bunch of information to put out also. Chamber of Commerce, and again, the bankers, your agents. If you have a business coach or somebody that you lean on to visit with about your company and challenges that they have, I would absolutely call them. I'm sure some of you know Stacey Eade. She's on the board of the Better Business Bureau. Is a phenomenal business coach. There are tons out there in the world, but she pivoted immediately to just providing information for her clients or for anybody else, and just finding people that have information that can help you bounce back or develop an on the fly. Okay, I don't really have a plan, so I need to develop one real quick. You can lean on the people that have already kind of thought about those things and say, here are the first steps that I would do to at least be able to open the doors or have that conversation to keep the business running.
Thank you, Brandon. I want to ask a follow-up question to that. What questions should we be asking our insurance agents during this time?
I both love and hate this question. Every business is different, so that's a hard question to answer. I would start by saying, getting with an agent. If you don't have somebody that you know, I would get with somebody that you trust. And I would do a full policy review and let that agent kind of walk you through what does the coverages do, what does each line item do. And a lot of times the agent will be able to identify areas of concern within your company. I've met with plenty of clients that didn't know what they had. I helped a client who was a manufacturing firm who they had business property coverage and it was $5,000 and they just bought like $50,000 worth of equipment. So they didn't know that they didn't know that. And so that's why it's a hard question to answer is I would say just have an agent or somebody that you trust walk you through line by line and explain it. Because that will also help you go, okay, well, you didn't touch on this and I have this, what do I do? I'm a website development company, and what happens if somebody sues me for copyright infringement? Tammy doesn't have that with her business, likely is a big risk, but she's got clients that their stuff is held within her warehouse. So how is that stuff protected? So that's very different per industry and per business. So I would start with just hey, I need to review my policy. Can you walk me through line by line? And if you talk to somebody that says they can't do that, it might be some opportunity for you to go find somebody that can.
Great point. Thank you, Brandon. Dan, I want to hear from you on this question as well. So what does this look like for your business? I mean, during this time, what does that mean? Where did your business look when we first were hit with this?
Yeah, I think it's important if you don't have a plan or something comes up quickly like this that you really didn't anticipate. That's where your relationships come in handy. I thought Tammy brought up a great point about competition. Even your competition, there's a feeling now that we're all in this together. And so, having relationships with the competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. And building on those. Also, talk to your customers a lot. So I have a client on the East Coast, a large financial firm. And I was working with them in February. And they were saying, hey, have you heard about the coronavirus? It's headed our way. And they said to me that day, it was mid-February, be ready for video conferencing. And I thought, whoa, never thought about that. And so I started kind of getting that together, and that's really been my life is video conferencing. Really, all my engagements are through that. So I think that having that conversation with customers, vendors, everybody ongoing before, after, and throughout, those relationships really pay off over time.
Great. Did any other panelists want to add anything to that question?
Yeah, I think probably all of us here have networks, and I think that we can't allow the panic or fear to cause us to hide, in ourselves. We do have to reach out to our networks. I think Brandon mentioned or Ryan mentioned a business coach. I'm in a group that has a business coach, and they're just restoration contractors from Canada to, they have them in Australia, and it's a huge group of people, and they're not in the same state, and so they're just kind of all over. And I can't take credit for it, but I sure benefited from it. They created on the Microsoft Teams a team of all of us, and we have 133 restoration contractors in this team, and people would talk about their HR problems that they were having. There's someone who was always reading up on the payroll protection stuff, and what that meant, how it could benefit us, and they would ask each other questions, and it's proven to be a great resource to reach out to those networks. And of course, I know that in my disaster planning, disaster restoration business, one of the things that we focus on is that if your business is up and running within 48 hours of having this type of disaster hit, then this statistical side of not reopening at all if you have a major. And so I think it's real important that one of those first calls that you make, if you don't have a plan in place, is call a disaster company and have them help you. They can at least help you get through the steps of, when you're not thinking straight, okay, you need to get your phones answering. You need to get your computer software going here. You need to have this, and we'll take care of the building, and they can help direct you. But then those key relationships that you have with your network, that's going to help you get the rest of the pieces in place. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. I think it's real important that we find our faith in any type of a disaster situation. And so reach out to that and know that we're all going to make it.
Thank you, Tammy.
Casey, quickly, I wanted to add on to this question, whether or not you have a plan for whatever type of storm or crisis, if you will, may occur. One of the things that we see businesses forget, one of the very first things, is to quickly revisit your goals. This feels like an obvious thing from a leadership and an organizational standpoint, but I'll share with the group that when the pandemic first arrived, the BBB leadership team and I sat down and we said, okay, we've got these great plans and we've done all this footwork for our year for 2020. Our goals for the short term in an unknown future, because none of us unfortunately has a crystal ball, and I'm still searching for a Harry Potter wand that works. If anyone knows where we can find one to but in any event, we said that our core goals, not knowing exactly what the future holds, are to preserve jobs and to communicate with our accredited businesses and help them through this time and aid them with information. So for example, one of the things Casey and our marketing team did at BBC, when we very first heard about the SBA loans, even though the information was incredibly preliminary, we reached out to our partners at SBA and said, can we please do a webinar? We would really like to offer it to our accredited businesses so that they can hear from you firsthand about at least the initial information that's coming out about the SBA loan. So again, we re-engineered our goals, and we're actually getting ready to sit down as a leadership team in the coming days and start to create another set of short-term goals and a plan, because as we all know, what we're facing with the current pandemic is trying to discern how we're going to reintegrate back into some level of an in-person and remote office settings, right? And so that will be new for a lot of businesses. Again, I really encourage you, whether or not you have a crisis plan, revisit that, but first decide what your core goals are as you revisit your P&L as well in the short term.
Thank you. Great ad. Great ad. Thank you. So this next question, I'm just going to go ahead and open it to all panelists. How would you, or do you recommend communicating with all staff about changes that are going on in your business, kind of pending the aftermath of the marketplace? So I want to hear from anybody who's got tips on how to communicate, platforms that you've used, any of that.
So
I wasn't sure what that meant.
I'll throw out text message in this day and age because it's instantaneous and pretty easy to get a hold of everybody. Is a phenomenal way to communicate. I would also encourage business owners and really anybody to make sure that you've got emergency contact information up to date for all of your employees. If there's a situation where you can't get a hold of your employee, you can text, call the emergency contact, and most of the time they're going to be able to get a hold of that individual if for whatever reason they don't have that information on there. So I would encourage, just as a tip and reminder, because I think that's something that's often overlooked, is make sure you have emergency contacts, make sure you can those are up to date and current.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
One platform that our company uses, we adopted from them. It's called GroupMe, and it's a group texting, and you can create groups of different people and have everybody in a bigger group, and so we're able to isolate our messages to that. So it's a little app on the phone for group texting.
Thank you.
Yeah, you definitely want to identify several ways of communicating if one fails. Something tactical that I thought of probably on the planning side was that did this a couple times, and that is if you're in a company, it doesn't have to be with a competitor, but maybe a similar size company, is sort of create a sort of disaster recovery planning cohort, that you can work and plan with another organization. So one thing you can do is say, hey, if something hits our building, can we send some people over and use some office space of your building? And we'll do the same for you. Can we put some extra phones or equipment in your storage and we'll house some of yours? And, maybe they're physically separated enough so you can kind of share in an event and start to build kind of some cohorts around your disaster recovery buddies that you can call on in time of need.
Dan, talking about tools, tell us a little bit more about your app so that if unfortunately people had to take shelter and say their home or business was destroyed, they could be found and located.
I'll show you on the phone. So that's what the icon looks like. It's pause critical location notification. And what we've done is we've worked with local 911 agencies and their first response teams to develop an app where it gives them information on how to find people where they're sheltering. So right now you list your shelter, right? But it doesn't, that list just tells the first responder that you have a shelter. They don't really use that much because it really doesn't give them any information. So they have to sweep through a whole neighborhood. What we do is that if you download the app, it pinpoints where your shelter location is, whether it's storm shelter or shelter in place. During an event, we do a push notification that there's a tornado warning or watch in your area. And suggest that you check in before the event happens. You check into your shelter, it goes on to report. When a tornado warning is issued, if you're in that polygon for National Weather Service, we start pushing these reports to 911 agencies and says who's checked in and checked out of their storm shelter. In the app, you can always also say if they're, elderly, kids, how many people are in the shelter, specifics about the storm shelter itself, is it above or below ground, and all this is reported to the 911 agencies. And then they distribute it out during the event as part of their normal standard FEMA response processes, right? So it's free app. Now it's in the App Store and it's available for Google Play as well. And the other app is just what we call personal authentication for work sites. And that allows people just simply check in and check out of their work site. That's that green icon right there. And that is just for day-to-day business, right? If you have remote workers, then it was originally built for the oil industry, but if you have remote workers, it geofences their work location. When they enter it, they can check in, and when they're done with their process, they can check out of that location. So those are two apps that we have on the market currently.
And Dan, tell us the names again of those one more time, if you would.
So if you go on, let's say, the Apple Store, it'll be PAWS, like the paw print, CLN, right? Critical Location Notification. The other is called PAWS Unmanned, and that is the standard worksite location information for remote workers.
And also following up guests, I'll include that info in the follow-up email so you have it ready there. So check it out.
Thank you for that chance to plug. I appreciate that. Sorry for the commercial, but.
Okay, so I'm just we're opening up for questions. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them now. Panelists, if you have any additional tips, resources, anything else that you want to add that you didn't get to talk about, now's your chance to shine. We'd love to hear anything else you want to add, but thank you so much. I think this has been an awesome panel, so I so appreciate each of you.
Yeah, hey, one thing that I was listed is what do we forget to plan for? And I think it's really, really important that we remember who are the key employees of our company. If you have someone who works for your company who is absolutely indispensable to your business, you need to start gleaning what they have. Understand what secrets do they have in their head. You need to get some they do documented and backed up, because if you lose a critical employee, that's just as bad as getting hit by a tornado, I promise.
And Tammy, we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, which is, quote, losing an employee may not necessarily happen in regard to a storm. It could be a number of types of occurrences. So maybe elaborate on that quickly to solidify your comments, because people may not be thinking about all the varying scenarios where that might come into play.
You can lose a key employee. Maybe a spouse gets a job in a different city and now somebody has to leave. They contract COVID-19 and they don't make it through that. That would be people can have personal issues that you may not even know about, and it could lead to them having to be separated from their job. And I've found that it's really important as an owner of a company for me to know what are the key players of my company and what do they really contribute so that I can make sure that I have a backup in case they have to take a leave for any reason. So I think it's always really critical to have some vertical planning in your organizational chart, so that you have, people should be training who is going to be their next replacement at all times, so that you're not left. And then also have some really key relationships with staffing agencies who could help you place somebody if you lost a key individual.
I'll add on to Tammy. There is policies available through insurance if somebody doesn't make it, that can help businesses to replace and provide a path forward for those businesses. So that's, again, I don't belabor that point, it's a little morbid, but just there's an opportunity there that you can see, planning with an insurance company, insurance providers, your financial, your bank entity. A lot of times they will bring some of those things up. So I do think it's, it goes all back to planning of, you talk through these with people that you trust, and ideas will come out from that.
Ryan, we haven't heard from you in a little while. Did you have any additional resources or tips that you might want to add?
Sure. The things I think that get most forgotten about are just the communications with your team, your staff, your departments. It's funny that most of the time when we first engage with clients, it's because they're in the middle of a disaster. Something's gone wrong, and we find that those situations that are scary, but if you don't panic and you determine what's critical to what you do, what you provide to your clients, what you provide to your customers, and you prioritize leaning into your staff, and then other relationships that you may have, vendors or contractors that you use to help do your business, and then documenting that so that if you have the situation come up again, that you're ready for it. You can't obviously prepare for something like a COVID-19 pandemic. There's never been anything like that. However, it is relatable in some ways to other situations, and you may be able, if you've got a nice, here's where we're currently at, and here's where we would be in a perfect world, to where you're at on that scale, it'll allow you to know, this is what I'm protected from this event, and this is what's going to be affected the most. And then if you know who handles those things or who can help you with those things, it will help you recover quicker. So what I would say, and what I've experienced, like I said, because most of our clients, we gain them when they're in an event, is just don't panic. Make sure that you document all the processes that you do to get back up and running. And then just know that you can lean into those processes again as long as you continue to refine them as you go.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Well, we are right on the nose of our panel discussion, and I just want to say first, thank you so much to all of our panelists who donated their time and their knowledge to talk through resources and varying things to help us all be better prepared for whatever storms hit. Following today's panel, probably later this afternoon, I will send up a follow-up email with some of those resources Brandon and Tammy and Dan mentioned, so that you all can refer back to those. Did we have another? Okay, sorry. So that you can all refer back to those. And then also, if you want to see some more storm preparedness tips and just varying tips for business, you can check out BBB Central OK on all the social media channels. We have tons of resources our team has been pulling together to try to provide our community with as much knowledge and information as we can. So we'd love to see you on there. But thank you so much. I so appreciate everyone who tuned in today, and we hope you have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you.